In the forgotten town of Dresal, hidden between endless forests that whispered secrets and mountains that stood like ancient guardians, life was quiet on the surface, but heavy with fear. The people lived their days in silence, carrying the weight of old tales, tales of shadows that moved when no wind blew, of voices that spoke in the night with no mouth to shape them, of eyes that burned from the darkness where no creature should dwell. These were not stories to entertain children by the fire. They were warnings, reminders of a truth long known but rarely spoken aloud, that demons from another world waited beyond the thin veil, hungry to tear their way into this one. Long ago, an order of exorcists had risen to protect Dresal from these nightmares, wielding ancient symbols, sacred words, and unyielding faith. But time eroded their numbers until only one remained, a man named Elián. His name carried both fear and reverence. He was known for his iron will, his knowledge of every forbidden text, and his unbreakable devotion to keeping the darkness at bay. Yet he was human still, and the weight of being the last guardian of an entire town pressed upon him like a stone on the chest. One fateful night, a frantic knock echoed through Elián's small home. A family stood trembling in his doorway, their faces pale as though they had already seen death. Their daughter Leah had been possessed, her body stolen by a presence that radiated terror even in their retelling. When Elián heard the demon's name whispered, his heart sank. Morax, the Deceiver. The name was carved into the margins of old texts, etched in warnings across brittle pages. Morax was a corrupter of both flesh and soil, a predator that not only devoured souls, but poisoned the very ground, twisting the world around him into a fortress of shadow. Elián knew the truth then. This was no ordinary possession. This was a war, and the battlefield would be the body of an innocent child. The house where the ritual began soon felt less like a home and more like the center of the world itself. Candles flickered against walls painted with sacred markings, and the air grew heavy, vibrating with unseen energy. Elián's voice rose in ancient chants, steady and commanding, while Leah writhed, her eyes burning with a light that did not belong to her. From her lips came a voice that was not her own, smooth, venomous, and mocking. "Elián," Morax whispered through the child, his words dripping like honey over poison. "I can give you power beyond your dreams. I can open the secrets of the cosmos to you. Why fight what you cannot destroy? Take my gift and bow only once." But Elián did not bow. His grip on the sacred texts tightened. His chants grew louder. The room shuddered as though the foundations of the earth groaned under the weight of the battle. Shadows stretched unnaturally, crawling across the walls like living things. The air was thick, pressing on his chest, every breath a war in itself. Yet Elián's resolve held. Every time Morax twisted Leah's voice into screams or temptations, Elián's faith pushed back with greater force. Hours dragged on, each second an eternity. Sweat drenched his body, blood seeped from wounds unseen, and still he fought. This was no clash of swords. It was a collision of wills, of light and darkness tearing against each other. At times Elián faltered, his mind assaulted with visions of a world burning, of himself standing as a king of shadows with Morax at his side. But in those moments he remembered the faces of Dresal, the frightened children, the weary parents, the hope they placed in him. And with that, he resisted. At last, as dawn threatened to pierce the night sky, Elián raised the final seal, his voice breaking but unyielding, and thundered the last of the exorcism rites. A scream shattered the silence, so piercing it seemed to split the heavens, and then all was still. Leah collapsed, unconscious but alive, and the presence of Morax was torn away, hurled back into the abyss from which he came. Silence settled over the room like a sacred shroud. Elián fell to his knees, his strength spent, his body marked by the scars of a battle no blade had touched. He had won, but the cost was carved into his soul. Leah would awaken free, but the memory of her torment would linger like a shadow at the edge of her dreams. The people of Dresal cried with gratitude when they learned of Elián's victory, yet more than relief they felt understanding. One man alone could not bear the burden of eternal darkness, and so, with hearts rekindled by his sacrifice, they began to send their children to him, boys and girls eager, terrified, and determined to come to Elián's home carrying both fear and hope. He trained them not only in ritual and symbol, but in resilience, in faith, in the unshakable truth that even the smallest light can defy the deepest night. In time, Elián was no longer remembered simply as the man who cast out Morax. He became the teacher, the builder of a new dawn. And long after his body returned to the earth, the legend of the last exorcist lived on. It was whispered that when the forests grew too dark or the mountains rumbled with shadow, Elián's spirit stood watch, a flame that refused to die. The people of Dresal carried his legacy in their blood, their chants, their courage, and so it was said, as long as even one soul remained to speak the sacred words, darkness could never claim the final victory. Because in Dresal, the last exorcist was not the end. He was the beginning of a fire that would burn for generations.